Thank you. All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon. Sorry. Yeah, if only. As we told you earlier today, the Secretary General expresses his gratitude and his appreciation to Ms. Catherine Colonna, who on Saturday submitted to him her final report as chair of the independent review group on UNRWA. The report, which is entitled, and I quote, Independent Review Mechanisms and Procedures to Ensure Adherence by UNRWA to the Humanitarian Principles of Neutrality. The Secretary General is also grateful to the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, the Michelson Institute, and the Danish Institute for Human Rights for the essential research that they conducted. The Secretary General accepts the recommendations contained in Ms. Colonna's report. He has agreed with the Commissioner General, Philippe Lazzarini, that UNRWA, with the Secretary General's own support, will establish an action plan to implement the recommendations contained in Ms. Colonna's final report. In this regard, the Secretary General counts on the cooperation of the donor community, the host countries, and the staff of UNRWA to fully cooperate with the implementation of the recommendations. Moving forward, the Secretary General appeals to all stakeholders to actively support UNRWA as it is a lifeline for Palestine refugees in the region. And as you well know, Ms. Colonna will be here to brief you in about 20 minutes in this room. And tomorrow, Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, will also be here to brief you, and that will be done at noon here, and then I will brief after that. Tor Veneslan, our special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, said over the weekend that he is gravely concerned by the heightened violence across the West Bank. He said that we must avoid further escalation and that attacks on civilians must stop, including settler violence. As the war in Gaza continues and regional instability mounts, West Bank stability is essential to keep alive the prospects of peace, he said. We also have a few operational details, updates to give you on our humanitarian work in Gaza. The humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territory, Mohanad Hadi, visited Gaza yesterday for the first time since he took up his post as humanitarian coordinator to see the situation on the ground and, of course, to meet with humanitarian colleagues working in Gaza. He visited sites in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah, including a shelter for displaced and a health center, and he spoke to members of the community. He also saw firsthand the catastrophic situation in Gaza and how the ongoing hostilities is continuing to affect people. He spent the night in Rafah, where 1.4 million men, women, and children are sheltering in dire living conditions. They are lacking basic necessity, including food, water, shelter, and health care. On the humanitarian front last week, 16 of our partners were able to provide food assistance across Gaza. That includes hot meals, bread, and flour. For its part, the World Food Programme reports to us that 4 bakeries in northern Gaza have resumed their operations. Across Gaza, WFP continues to provide fuel, wheat flour, and other necessities to resources to about 16 bakeries. On the health front, in the past week, 2 emergency medical teams have been deployed to North Gaza to support Kamal Adwan and Al-Hawda hospitals. At present, there are 20 emergency medical teams across Gaza, including 2 that are operating in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, fuel continues to be distributed daily to water and sanitation facilities, but the quantities continue to be insufficient and inconsistent, including, of course, in northern Gaza. This morning, our Secretary General spoke at the follow-up of the Economic and Social Council's Forum on Financing for Development. He said that while financing is the fuel of development, many developing countries are running on empty, and this is creating a sustainable development crisis. The Secretary General underscored that right now the world is facing an annual financing gap of around $4 trillion to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a sharp rise from the $2.5 trillion gap 1 year before the COVID-19 pandemic. He added that we need a surge of investment to bridge the financing gap and give developing countries a fighting chance to build better lives for their people, as well as a reform of the international financial system. His remarks were shared with you. Meanwhile, our Deputy Secretary General is in Abuja, Nigeria, take part in a high-level African counterterrorism meeting convened by the government of Nigeria with support of the UN Office for Counterterrorism. Speaking during the opening session, she stressed the need to address the root causes that lead to terrorism, notably the lack of development and social inclusion. She also highlighted the importance of rebuilding the social contract, promoting African-led solutions, and fostering regional cooperation and solidarity in the fight against terrorism in Africa. I also want to note that the head of the office, Vladimir Voronkov, spoke at the opening conference, and his remarks are available to you online. Tonight, the Deputy Secretary General will travel to Addis Ababa to attend the 10th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. There, she'll be accompanied by Guy Ryder, the Undersecretary General for Policy, and she is scheduled to be with senior government officials, engage with colleagues from the United Nations system and other stakeholders based in the region to accelerate implementation on the Sustainable Development Goals. That follows the SDG Summit last year, and that is in lead up to the Summit of the Future in September. After Addis, the Deputy Secretary General will stop briefly in the United Arab Emirates, where she will meet with senior government officials to advance action on the SDGs in the lead up to the Transforming Education Summit and the Summit of the Future. She will be back in New York on the 27th of April. This morning, the Security Council held a meeting on the UN Interim Administration mission in Kosovo. Briefing Council member was Caroline Ziadeh, the special representative of the Secretary General and head of the UN mission there. She noted that during the recent months, tensions have simmered, with one major explanation being an inability to address long-standing issues through adequate communication and dialogue, whether this be between Pristina and Belgrade or between the Kosovo Serb community and the Pristina central authorities. Ms. Ziadeh stressed that the full implementation of the EU-facilitated agreements has become ever more pressing priority in order to help alleviate the continuing series of crises in Kosovo. Her full remarks were shared with you. This afternoon, the Security Council will reconvene to discuss the situation in Haiti. The head of our mission there, Maria Isabel Salvador, will brief council members, as well as Khada Wali, the executive director of the Office of Drugs and Crime, and Catherine Russell, the executive director of UNICEF. We will share those remarks with you ahead of time as much as we can. Tomorrow, the Security Council will hold an open debate on conflict-related sexual violence. Pramila Patton, the head of our Office on Sexual Violence, will present the Secretary General's annual report on the same topic. And I want to flag to you the report is actually already online. Also, ahead of tomorrow's open debate, our colleagues at the UN Counterterrorism Committee's Executive Directorate, CITED, have published a report on the outcome of consultations they've organized with civil society organizations that support victims of sexual and gender-based violence linked to terrorism. These consultations were part of an ongoing effort to better understand the gaps, challenges, and ways in which states could improve compliance with their counterterrorism obligations. That report is online, and I encourage you to look at it. Turning to Haiti, the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that despite the difficulties, we, along with our partners, are continuing to support the most vulnerable people. Since the beginning of March, UNICEF, the International Organization for Migration, and our humanitarian partners have facilitated the delivery of 5.3 million liters of drinking water to more than 60,000 displaced people across 29 different sites in the capital, Port-au-Prince. They also distributed thousands of hygiene kits to displaced sites. On the health front, with the support of the Pan American Health Organization, Haiti continues to strengthen its surveillance for early detection of cholera and other epidemic diseases. Also, Carl Scow, the World Food Programme's Deputy Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer, has just concluded his visit to Haiti. He went to Cap Haitien, where he visited the resilience project, including a farmer association that produces bananas, beans, and vegetables that WFP buys for its school meals programs in the area. He also met with displaced people who fled violence in the capital and who are currently receiving food assistance. Mr. Scow will brief you in person on the situation in Haiti on Thursday in this very room here in New York. You saw that, I think, late Friday or over the weekend, I can't remember when, late Friday, I think. We issued a statement on in which the Secretary General said he was closely following the normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. He's welcomed the agreement reached on April 19th between the respective state commissions on the delimitation of the state border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. He encourages the parties to continue the delimitation and demarcation of the remaining sections of the border and to tackle all outstanding bilateral issues, achieving full normalization of relations. And report we found interesting, which I want to flag to you on the impact of conflicts on children worldwide. UNICEF is saying that between 2018 and 2022, explosive weapons were responsible for nearly half of the more than 47,500 instances of children killed and maimed that were verified by the UN in more than 24 different conflict zones. That's around the world. The vast majority of these instances occurred in populated areas. Countries are meeting this week in Norway for the first international follow-up conference to the political declaration on the use of explosive weapons in populated areas, which was adopted in Dublin in November of 2022. This will provide a crucial opportunity to better protect children, their families, and communities from armed conflict. We have a new resident coordinator. Gita Sabharwal of India is a new UN resident coordinator in Indonesia. Now she has the host country's approval. Her start date is today. She brings close to 30 years of experience in development, supporting climate transition, sustainable peace, governance, and social policy. She has served in this role in Thailand and has also been peace building and development advisor at the UN in Sri Lanka, and we congratulate her. Today is International Mother Earth Day. In his message, the Secretary General said humanity is acting like Mother Earth's delinquent child. So good. We depend on nature for the food we eat, the air we breathe, and the water we drink, and we have brought chaos to the natural world, poisoning on our planet and pollution, wiping out species and ecosystems with abandon, and destabilizing our climate with greenhouse emissions, he said. The Secretary General added that together we must restore harmony with nature, embrace sustainable production and consumption, and protect ourselves from harm, creating jobs, reducing poverty, and driving sustainable development as we do so. More information online, and before I take your questions, nothing before I take your questions. Maggie.
Thanks, Steph. Happy Monday. Just a pre-Colonna question for you. Back in January, when you announced the accusations against the 12 UNRWA staffers, you said that 9 were fired, 1 was dead, and the UN was working to clarify the identity of the other 2. I don't recall if you ever identified them or, cleared that up.
I hope to be able to, I know I've been saying this for a few days now, but we do hope to have somewhat of an update for you from OIOS in the coming days.
But is that an OIOS issue to find out who the other 2 people, to see if they're alive or dead or fired or?
Let me try to get some answers on that.
Okay, and then secondly, how much was the budget for this external review that Madame Colonna just conducted?
That's a very valid question. She may be able to answer that, but I will check.
And do you know, what department that money comes from?
It came from UNOPS.
Okay, thank you.
UNOPS, the UN Office for Project Services. There you go. I didn't know it was an acronym test today. Yes.
Thank you, Steph. I know we've asked this before, but I'll ask it again given the news, and that's, has the Secretary General ever received up to today any evidence from the Israeli government on the allegations against the UNRWA employees that Israel says?
So what I do know from OIOS is that they have been in contact on a number of times with the Israeli authorities directly, and that's OIOS to security services in Israel. As soon as I can share with you an update, I will.
Okay, thanks. And how would the Secretary General characterize this report? I mean, you've given the facts of his response, but it strikes me as a pretty clean bill of health.
Listen, it's a very thorough report, and I think it lays out. I'm sorry. Sorry. It's a very thorough report. It lays out clear recommendations, which the Secretary General accepts all of them, and I think it lays out also a roadmap for stakeholders, which includes member states, donors, host countries, and staff to move forward. And it also underscores the fact that, as we've been saying for a long time, that UNRWA is a lifeline for all of the people it serves in the Palestinian territories, plus obviously in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Jordan. It also, I think, the report also outlines what, from the Secretary General's standpoint, what UNRWA has been doing for a long time, right? And so, I think it is part of our efforts of transparency and heightened communications with donors. Now, obviously, they will have to make those decisions.
The last question, thank you. I mean, the report says that UNRWA has developed an approach to neutrality UNRWA has developed a more developed approach to neutrality than other similar UN or NGO entities. But nevertheless, the damage is done with the countries that have decided to pull funding from UNRWA. The damage is done.
Well, I mean, we do, I mean, you know, member states, like people, can change their minds, right? So we hope that we will see a return of donors to UNRWA, whether it's donors who had previously given, who have paused their donations, or whether it's donors who have the means and have not done so in the past and now will contribute to UNRWA. Celia.
My question, Steph, is about Haiti. Some 20 NGOs have launched a new appeal for France to reimburse more than $100 billion paid by Haiti for its independence. What does the Secretary General think about it? Is he on the same line, or what does he think?
The issue of reparations within the context of people of African descent, I think, is one that the Secretary General has been very strong on and has encouraged all stakeholders to pursue a discussion. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stefan. During the weekend, I think you followed the news that 2 mass graves were discovered in the yard of Shifa Hospital. Another mass grave was discovered in front of Nasser Hospital. It talks about at least 250 in one of those mass graves. Some of the bodies were found distorted and part of the organs had been missing. Are you aware of this report, and what do you say to that?
Yes, we're very much aware. We've seen these reports on various media platforms. They're extremely troubling, to say the least. Yet another reason is, if we needed one, for all of these sites to be fully investigated in a way that is credible and independent. And yet another reason why we need a ceasefire, why we need to see an end to this conflict, why we need to see greater access for humanitarians, for humanitarian goods, greater protection of hospitals. We need to see the hostages released. I mean, it just reinforces all the points that we've been making.
The special rapporteur on the right of health, she said that what is seeing in Gaza is a genocide. Do you subscribe to that statement?
I think on the issue of genocide, we've been very clear that for the Secretary General, the issue, the labeling of an event as a genocide needs to be done by a competent judicial authority.
My last question. On Columbia University, the president of the Columbia invited the police to arrest over 100 students for expressing solidarity with the Palestinians, calling for ceasefire. Do you have any
comment? The question was asked on Friday, and my answer is the same as anytime anyone asks me about demonstrations. We fully subscribe to the right of people to demonstrate peacefully. Michelle.
Sorry,
And then
just
Dulcie.
and apologies if you've already said this at some point recently. On UNRWA and funding, what's the funding gap at the moment? Like, how dire are their finances?
I think my understanding, last time I checked, they were okay through June. They've gotten some new donations from countries that had not given before. But we'll try to get you a financial breakdown.
Okay, yeah, just will they have enough to are they getting enough extras stepping up to fill the US gap, which
the short answer is no, right? I mean, they don't have enough to work on a predictable long-term basis. I mean, for any organization, especially a humanitarian one, to say, oh yeah, we're okay for the next 3 months, that doesn't mean we're okay, right? Dulcie.
Just wondering about Catherine Colonna. Will she continue to be involved in the implementation of this review, or any role foreseeable?
It's not that I'm aware of. So, Deji.
Two totally unrelated issues. First one, the landlocked developed countries conference is due to be held in June, but last week there's a letter from USG Fatima said that conference won't happen that time due to unforeseen circumstances. Do you know what the unforeseen circumstances are?
No, you would have to ask the Rwandan host.
Is it related to the relation between Rwanda and the UN, or?
I don't believe there's an issue between the relationship between Rwanda and the UN.
Okay. So second, for the past few weeks, there are narratives that China's production on battery, EV, and solar panels are there has overcapacity. Just want to know, if there's an affordable price for the world for those three things, would it be good for sustainable development?
Look, I'm not intellectually equipped this morning to answer trade issues.
Mm-hmm. But affordable solar panels
we do support alternative non-greenhouse, non-carbon center transportation modes. Okay, unless there's a question online, I will go and get the main act.
Merci.
All right, good afternoon. We're delighted to be joined by Catherine Colonna, who
Bonjour.
you know is chairs
Bien.
the report on UNRWA, so she's here to present the report and take some of your questions. Catherine, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Stéphane. Merci beaucoup, Stéphane. We can speak in French between us without any witnesses. Hearing. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be back in New York, 2 months after my first visit here and speaking to you 2 months ago at the very beginning of the mission. As you know, the Secretary General has established the independent review in February to assess, I'd like to quote, whether UNRWA is doing everything in its power to ensure neutrality and to respond to allegations of serious breaches when they are made. The review was also asked to make recommendations if necessary. This followed serious allegations about the possible involvement of some UNRWA individuals in the 7th of October terrorist attacks on Israel. So I'd like to be very clear on this. These allegations are under investigation by the OIOS, Internal Oversight Services. It is a separate mission, and it is not in our mandate. Let me quickly explain how we've worked. For the last 9 weeks, it was a short time frame, we have extensively analyzed the mechanisms and procedures in place within UNRWA. We have traveled, including in the region. We traveled to Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Ramallah, Amman. We met with officials as well as with UN agencies and NGOs. We visited the Shufat refugee camps in Jerusalem East, run by UNRWA. And we visited UNRWA's headquarters in Haman. All in all, I think we've had conversations and meetings with over 200 people throughout the review, including both, of course, local and international staff, of course, but not only. And I think I've spoken with representatives of 47 countries and organizations. So the first thing I'd like to say is that I would like to personally thank all those who've given me their time, support, information, and I've been so patient for answering our many questions, and quite often we came back to the same context, to further details. And I want you to know that we've received a very good cooperation elsewhere, everywhere, from every single interested party. And this is important for you to know. Of course, this was highly appreciated. Of course, I would like to thank the 3 research institutes who worked with us. They had thorough research, and that was immensely useful. Now, when we come to substance, I would like to say first that UNRWA plays an indispensable and irreplaceable role in the region. And this must be said clearly. Let's start from that. In the absence of a political solution, we know it provides life-saving humanitarian aid and essential services to the population. And of course, as we speak in this critical time, UNRWA has a vital role in the humanitarian response in Gaza. Overall, the findings of the review are that UNRWA has in place a very significant number of mechanisms and procedures to ensure compliance with the humanitarian principle of neutrality. Actually, they probably have a more developed system than other UN organizations or agencies, which is a necessity considering the very difficult environment, complex and difficult situation in which they operate, and the uniqueness of their mission. There's always room for improvement, and some issues related to neutrality persist. This is why this mission was created. And among some events, I could quote, for example, instances of staff publicly taking sides, host countries' textbooks that could sometimes contain some problematic content. We'll go further in the report with that, as well as politicized union, making, it did happen, operational disruptions or making threats against the management. I'm presenting this report, and we have the report. I think it's public as we speak. I'm presenting the report as the chair. And I've identified 8 critical areas to ensure compliance with UNRWA's neutrality principles. Let me go briefly through the 8 areas, if I may, and then I'll take your questions. One is engagement with donors. Enhancing interactions between UNRWA and its donors is imperative to foster trust and to strengthen partnership. I've heard it from so many states at the very beginning of the mission, and it must be addressed, obviously, but frankly speaking, I think this is not too difficult by just increasing the interactions. So recommendations will include increasing donor updates on the finances, on the budget, on the structure of the budget, on neutrality allegations or breaches when they occur. 2, governance. UNRWA has a unique mission, I repeat, but as a very interesting structure. They do not have an executive board. They have an advisory commission, and the advisory commission provides advice. So UNRWA would benefit from stronger governance structures in support of its leadership and of what the management tries to pursue as a strategic line. And stopping here just for a while, you hear me saying this several times this morning or this afternoon rather. I would like to stress that the international community has a responsibility in helping and supporting UNRWA in addressing neutrality issues, globally speaking, in its mission, including in helping the agency to address these difficult challenges it faces sometimes. It is a shared responsibility. We have recommendations for governance. Without changing the mandate, it is what it is, and the structure is what it is. I recommend the Advisory Commission to meet more regularly, maybe at a higher level, sometimes at the UN headquarters here in New York or in Geneva. Why not? At the level of permanent reps. I recommend to have neutrality as a standing issue on its agenda. Is it an issue? Yes, that's what we're here for. They don't discuss about it. And I recommend create a dedicated working group on neutrality to address this question. 3, management and internal oversight capacities or structures. And I'll be quite direct here. It is a critical area where there are major gaps. UNRWA has undertaken huge and commendable efforts to reform its system, and these initiatives should be further expanded. We have the Oversight and Internal Services, we have the Ethics Office. They could be in power with a greater role. Also, very clearly, there needs to be more senior international staff in field positions in each of the 5 fields of operations. You know, UNRWA has just a tiny percentage of international staff, less than 1% actually, and the rest is local employees, which is quite natural because it delivers services directly to the population. So nurses are, local teachers are local, workers are local. Nevertheless, they're missing maybe this management structure that is needed if we want to see oversight being reinforced. In addition to that, we've noted that some political influence sometimes is exercised on decisions related to projects, and it shouldn't be the case. This is posing a significant risk. This is not respecting neutrality, so it is crucial also to address this side of the question. 4, neutrality of staff. It is not news that UNRWA faces challenges due to the politicization of its staff. Not all of them, but some of them, and usually the higher you go to the positions of influence, the more you'll see that. This is again affecting its neutrality. So it is crucial to reform prevention strategies and monitoring strategy. The staff should better respect staff regulations and rules. They have accepted those rules when entering, they've signed, they should respect those rules. And the agency should give the appropriate response to potential breaches. It is also needed. So coming to our recommendations, some, and these are just a few examples, include regularly sharing the list of employees, digitalized with some details of the employees, with host countries and with Israel. It works well in some countries, less with Israel. In the past years, it could have been better, but in the very recent times, this is affected, of course, by the global atmosphere. So host countries and Israel will need to provide screening results and evidence if there's any red flag on a person. We recommend that the agency also vet staff when promoted. Each time you reach a certain level of responsibility, you must be cleared. Also, they have a whistleblower system, which is good because when you see something, you can report it. It could and should be strengthened. 5, neutrality of installations. Again, not so much bragging news here that it did happen that sometimes UNRWA's installations have been used for, or misused, rather, I should say, for political or military purposes by various groups. I'm not thinking of one only here, various parties, various groups. And this is undermining the neutrality of the installation. It should not happen. Preventive measures, enhanced monitoring of the installations, transparent reporting are necessary steps to address this issue effectively. So there should be more inspections, an inspection looking at a larger scope, looking beyond the UN logo, looking beyond posters and various signs, looking a little bit further. We know it's needed. The agency does it, but could expand the community awareness campaigns that they do on the civilian nature of these installations. They are civilian installations. They are UNRWA installations. They should be respected and protected. 6, neutrality of education. Let me first say that the role of UNRWA is so highly important there. UNRWA as a system that is crucial, indispensable to several hundreds of thousands of children in the region. However, it has been reported for many years, not to say decades, that some schools may have been utilized to spread political views, violating neutrality principles, not respecting UN values, not respecting UNESCO standards. You will find additional material in the report. And though UNRWA has made considerable progress in the past few years to mitigate the risk addressed to some content promoting hate or inciting violence in the textbooks, in the classroom, it now needs needs to implement a zero-tolerance policy. 7, you're almost there. Neutrality of staff union. Over the years, political factions have used UNRWA's staff union system to pressure UNRWA's leadership, to use influence, sometimes causing, I repeat, operational disruptions. And this is not the role of staff unions. Staff unions should represent the staff. They're not quite representative, by the way, even if I judge only by the gender balance. 50% of the staff is women, or 50% of it is men, and the other half is women. When you go up to the top, there's only one woman representative at the top level, and 18 men. We know this is one of the most sensitive issues with all the influence attached to that. It needs to be addressed with the full support of the Advisory Commission and of member states. Very recently, the Commissioner General pushed for a reform of the system. It was not supported by the Advisory Commission. UNRWA cannot be alone facing this issue without getting support from member states in the first place of the Advisory Commission. So recommendations will be quite clear, hoping to help making it through. They include reforming the 1990 Statute of the Union of Area Staff of UNRWA, dating 1990. It should be updated. And it should be aligned with the UN Staff Union Statute. We also think an independent entity should vet every staff union representative. 8, and we're opening a door towards a broader scope, even beyond what we will achieve now, enhanced partnerships, while respecting fully the mandate. The mandate is what it is by the 1949 resolution. And actually, specifically in line with this resolution, cooperation with other UN organizations and agencies is needed. It is there. It has already been engaged. However, especially considering the current crisis in Gaza, and in full respect of the mandate of the agency, I repeat, some additional measures could be considered to help UNRWA deliver life-saving assistance to those in need. So I will end there. There are some 50 recommendations in the report. I just mentioned a few. And I'm confident that implementing these recommendations will help UNRWA fulfill its mandate and restore confidence when needed. I presented the findings and the recommendations of the report to the Secretary General on Friday. During our meeting, he was kind enough to call our work important and decisive, for which I'm very grateful. And this morning he issued a statement saying that he accepted the recommendation. This is a very important decision and a very important step. The Secretary General endorses the recommendations. And so it is now up to the Commission General to take this forward and to provide a clear plan on how the agency will follow up on these recommendations. And one last note, because I want to repeat that I strongly believe that member states, the international communities, host countries, also need to help UNRWA implement these reforms so it better fulfills its mandate. It is a shared responsibility, obviously. Thank you. You have questions, I'm sorry. Thank you, Stefan.
We'll start with Edie. I would implore you to keep it to one question per person so we get as many. I know it's a challenge.
It's one question.
Yes, thank you, Edie. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Colonna, for doing this briefing on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. We welcome your presence here. You mentioned repeatedly the funding issue for UNRWA. Can these recommendations be implemented without additional funding, and what is your message to donors?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for your first remark, Madam. Well, some recommendations will require or could require additional funding, either because there's an extra funding and the budget is expanding, or if some difficult, hard choices are made within the budget to devote more resources to one action than to the other one. And indeed, funding the organization is a vital necessity for the organization, but it's not all about finance. It's not all about budget. Some recommendations can be implemented without extra financing. For example, meeting more regularly for the advisory commission, taking decisions or taking orientations at least, and so many other examples. We've tried to cover, there could be so many more recommendations, but we've tried to be, if I may, I think my responsibility was to deliver to the Secretary General a report that would be short, concise, up to the point, direct, clear, and if possible, helpful. And this is what we've tried to do. And covering these 8 areas, we found recommendations that could be implemented, some of them very quickly, but all of them are, I think, visible, real, concrete, practical, implementable. Some will be easier and quicker to fix than others. But in any event, it is not only about finance. And I've repeated several times during this briefing, and I think we've wrote it also in the report, that sustaining the organization in its mission is what the international community should do. They created UNRWA. They have to help UNRWA to deliver, to face those difficult challenges, sometimes to, move on and overcome them, find new mechanisms. This is the purpose of the report.
Thank you, Bassam. Al Jazeera.
Bisan Abu Quaik with Al Jazeera Arabic. I wanted to ask about the portion that has to do with education and the curriculum, because, as you know, UNRWA has generation after generation have graduated of Palestinian refugees through UNRWA schools, and they've went on to be successful people in their domains. So have you looked at the curriculum, UNRWA curriculum in specific schools, like the citations that you have in your report? Have you or any of your team been able to look at specific examples where you say, there has been incitement to violence and so on and so forth?
The short answer would be yes. Indeed, of course. We've done extensive research. This is not a new issue. As you know, it has been on for decades now. There were improvements. Nevertheless, some of the textbooks, and I must mention that we've been mostly concentrating on this issue and what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. We couldn't go to Syria, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of things to be looked at there. Some of the content, marginal, but even if marginal, rewrite is problematic. Glorification of jihad, incitation to violence, maps of the current world, not historical maps, not showing the existence of Israel. So many other problematic issues. We've lots of examples. This is unfortunately, a really well-documented area.
Michelle, then Abdelhamid.
Thank you. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. A spokesperson for the Israeli Foreign Ministry has just commented on the report and described it as insufficient, an effort to avoid the problem and not address it head on. And he says the Colonna report ignores the severity of the problem and offers cosmetic solutions that do not deal with the enormous scope of Hamas's infiltration of UNRWA. Would you like to respond?
I wanted to know that we have had good relations with Israel. We were received really well by a wide variety of actors there, including officials, several levels and in several domains. I just briefed one of those contacts we had there, and I'm not surprised about what we say, because I told him, of course you will find it is insufficient, but please take it on board. Whatever we recommend, if implemented, will bring good. Now, beyond that, we all know that the Israeli government has publicly strong views on UNRWA. The vast majority of the international community doesn't share these views.
Maggie, Abdelhamid, then Maggie, sorry.
Thank you, Madam. My name is Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have first just a short comment and then a question. The comments. No, I expected you to. I expected you to say few good words about the 171 who paid their lives, and you should recommend UNRWA to be granted the Nobel Prize for that. My question is: you referred so many times to anti-Semitism. What is your definition of anti-Semitism? Is calling for the Palestinian legitimate rights, is that fall under anti-Semitism, or speaking about Israeli occupation, even if they call it Zionist occupation? I think, why is that anti-Semitism? Thank you.
Maybe I will comment your comment then by reminding you that I've several times said that this neutrality should be respected. I even said protected, I think. And of course, this applies to individuals as well. Now, as we know on the question of definition of anti-Semitism, there are several. The Secretary General has privileged one, so as the European Union, for example. Now, I think that examples in textbooks of mathematics being illustrated by, killing how many Zionists is, in my view, something that should not be in a textbook, and certainly not in a textbook in an UNRWA school. Characterizations of Jews as having, very negative qualities, negating the existence of Israel, and so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, again, and I just answered this question, there are so many examples, less than before, because the textbooks have been reformed by the PA. But still, they want to reform it because some of the content is not in line with UNESCO values, UNESCO standards, UN values, and so on and so forth.
Maggie?
Thank you, Madame Colonna, over here. It's Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. I just want to know when you expect your recommendations to be implemented, particularly ones, I understand like advisory committee can meet. Okay, that's easy enough to do in the middle of a war, but the ones you make regarding staff, for instance, e-training and things like this on neutrality. I'm not sure how they're supposed to be expected to do it at the moment when they have no homes, no internet, no electricity. There's practical obstacles. So how soon do you see your recommendations being implemented? And Israel's been very clear in that it wants to dismantle UNRWA. Do you think these reforms will change their opinion? Have you seen any indication from them when you were talking to them that if certain reforms were implemented, they'd be okay with UNRWA continuing? Thank you.
I think I've just answered the last part of your question, and then we shall see what their reaction is and where their actions are. On the first part of the question, I really leave it up to the Commissioner General now to give you his views, his reactions to the recommendations, especially having heard the Secretary General. And I'm sure he's desiring to presenting you with a plan soon, follow-up plan, implementation, action plan, response plan, call it whatever. And it is really up to you now to know what is implementable in the short term, what requires more work. But I repeat, I will not do that on their behalf. I'm not here for that. But we've been very careful in designing our recommendations to cover a set of recommendations where some could be addressed quickly, some would require more work, some would require more support also from the international community, some would depend only from UNRWA. So they will give that sequencing as soon as they can. I'm hearing that they might do it soon.
Ephraim, Arab News.
Thank you so much, Madame Colonna. You spoke about the level of cooperation of all stakeholders and all parties concerned with your report. How would you characterize the Israeli cooperation with you, given that, as you may have seen today, the main takeaway from your report is Israel has yet to provide any evidence for its allegations that UNRWA personnel were involved in the October 7th attack. So how would you characterize that cooperation and this main takeaway? Thank you.
Thank you. I covered everybody when I said that we received very good cooperation from everywhere, including Israel. I could go in details, who received us and so on and so forth, but I want to repeat that we had an excellent cooperation from all sides. Now about one of the quotes, I couldn't read everything this morning, but one of the quotes that have been issued does not respect, I think, the text of the report. We've written, and the beauty of writing reports is that you can refer to what's written. We've written that UNRWA has not received evidence by Israel, not that there is no evidence. It's very different. So please, again and again, refer to the content of the report and not to what you hear sometimes about it. I would really appreciate if you could base your comments and base your judgments on the content and not on preconceived opinions.
Deji?
Hi, Madam Xu Dezhi with China Central Television. In your report, you said there's robust framework of neutrality in UNRWA, but there's still neutrality-related issues persists. You just mentioned some curriculums and wrong use of the facilities of UNRWA there. Can you just give us an idea how big of the problem is, you think? Do you think it's a systematic problem? Or how big is this a problem that big enough for donors to stop funding UNRWA or to dismantle UNRWA? How big is the problem? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. The problem is serious enough for the Secretary General to have initiated this review. So it is an existing issue, absolutely. Now, we've, at the beginning, and including at the beginning of this briefing, stressed the fact that the set of rules, the mechanisms in place, the procedures in place are probably, I said probably, but I'm sure I could say are the most elaborate within the UN system, precisely because it's such a difficult issue to work in such a complex and sensitive environment. Now, what needs to be improved will be improved. And I repeat, I'm confident that implementing these measures will help UNRWA delivering on its mandate. And I would, strongly encourage, again, the international community to be side by side with the agency so it can perform its mission and overcome the challenges when they are there. This is the purpose of this review.
Thank you. Gabriel, Al Jazeera.
Thank you, Ms. Colonna. Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. You stated that Israel has given no evidence to UNRWA about their claims that any UNRWA employees took part in October 7th. But did you, during your investigation, ask Israel for evidence?
Thank you for this opportunity to have me repeating that there must be no confusion between what we've been tasked for, which is assessing whether UNRWA does everything in its power to ensure neutrality and address challenges, and what the OAS is in charge of. There are two separate missions. So allegations regarding individuals, a difficult case, are in the scope of the OIOS mission. It is not the scope of our mandate. And by the way, it is no surprise that Israel did not provide evidence to UNRWA because it doesn't owe this evidence during the investigation to UNRWA, but to the OIOS. And my understanding is that they have a better cooperation now than at the beginning, and that the team will, their investigators will return there soon. So this is separate mission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie, then we have to close it because we have
Yes, yes.
Si je peux me permettre une dernière question en français, puisqu'elle a déjà été posée
Avec plaisir.
Elle a été posée plusieurs fois en anglais, mais tout de même, quand moi j'ai eu le député ambassadeur ici d'Israël, il avait été assez clair que sur les preuves, les preuves de ces allégations d'Israël, elles seraient communiquées à l'OIOS, mais aussi également à votre équipe. Est-ce que c'est tout de même un breach de neutralité, et ça pouvait, même si ce n'était pas l'objet direct de votre audit, ça pouvait être en périphérie, apparaître. Est-ce que vous avez demandé ces preuves? Comment ça s'est passé? Est-ce que vous en avez même parlé avec Israël?
Nous avons évidemment parlé, et à l'initiative des autorités israéliennes et à la nôtre, de l'appréciation par Israël du comportement des employés de l'UNRWA parfois, de la façon dont l'organisation travaillait. Et ça fait partie, je ne vous apprendrai rien, des préoccupations qu'Israël a voulu nous transmettre sur le manque de neutralité, selon cet État, d'un certain nombre d'employés de l'UNRWA. Mais nous ne sommes pas en charge de recueillir des preuves. Donc nous avons recueilli les vues israéliennes, elles sont demeurant publiques ô combien et connues et répétées, mais tout ce qui relève de l'investigation, tout ce qui est du ressort de la recherche de preuves, n'est pas dans notre mandat, c'est le mandat de OIOS, qui est au travail en ce moment.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Merci à tous.
Monica, who will brief you on behalf of the President of the Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. Oui, madame. Et vous?
Il y a un autre briefing, il faut juste qu'on
on s'en va, ça va.
Voilà.
Enjoy my freedom.
Thank you so much.
Merci. OK.
Take care. Thank you.
On va passer par là.
Oui, pas de problème. So, good afternoon, everyone. I will wait for the first. There's some water here. I think it's not for me, that's for sure. So let's start for today, shall we? Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you so much. Thank you. And then we will be brief, and then you can start lunch. So this morning, the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Dennis Francis, spoke at the opening segment of the 2024 ECOSOC Forum on Financing for Development. In his remarks, the PJ highlighted that development finance is more needed than ever, particularly for countries in the global south. President Francis recalled that last year alone, the global public debt reached a staggering $313 trillion, and that developing countries are paying twice as much in interest on their total sovereign debt stocks than developed nations. This is one of the reasons that more than 100 countries have been forced to make the unfortunate choice between servicing the debt, paying the debt, investing in their development, in other words, in their people. The theme of debt sustainability and equality for all and its correlation with sustainable development was one of the topics discussed during the Sustainability Week, which concluded on 19 April. And the PJ has also reiterated his call for a reform of the international